Welcome, dear listeners, to another exciting chapter of Echoes Through Time, where we weave the fabric of the past into a living conversation. Today, we travel to the tranquil hills of Kent, England, in the mid-19th century, an era of scientific curiosity clashing with long-standing traditions. Our subject is Charles Darwin, a man whose meticulous observations and groundbreaking ideas would alter the course of biology and challenge humanity's notions of its own origins. Join us as we step into 1859, mere weeks before the world is introduced to his seminal work on the origin of species. It is a mild autumn afternoon at Down House. The gardens are neatly tended, with clusters of late-blooming flowers swaying under a gentle breeze. Bees drone lazily, and you can just make out the distant bleating of sheep in the fields. Emerging from a flicker in time, our wide-eyed traveler Leo takes in the tidy footpaths and the Georgian facade of the house. He breathes in the faint aroma of freshly turned soil and glances about, gathering courage to knock on the door. This is where history's gentle revolutionary resides.
Mr. Darwin. Hello. I hope I'm not intruding. My name is Leo. I've come a very long way, though not exactly by carriage, and I'd be honored if we could speak.
Ah, good day, young friend. You certainly startled me, but I sense a friendly curiosity about you. Please come in, though the day is pleasant, so perhaps we might stroll the garden instead. I find fresh air eases conversation and soothes my constitution.
That sounds fantastic. I'm grateful for your time, Mr. Darwin. I'm somewhat of a traveler, and I've heard all about your contributions to science. But I want to understand them directly from you. Your story, your motivations, your hopes.
I see. You have piqued my interest. People have been calling upon me often these days, especially with my forthcoming publication, though not usually in such a mysterious manner. Still, I'm always pleased to discuss nature. Let us walk toward the orchard. Mind the step here.
The grounds here at Down House are lovely. Did you plan them to support your research?
To some degree, yes. I find that having a variety of plants, a greenhouse, and a bit of woodland fosters my botanical experiments. I'm quite fond of investigating pollination in flowers, the behaviors of earthworms, and so forth. This orchard provides apples, pears, and a quiet place to think. I take regular walks along that path there, my sand walk, to let ideas percolate in my mind.
Before we delve into your theories, I want to hear a bit about your early life. You were born in 1809 in Shrewsbury, right? What kind of childhood did you have?
Indeed, I was born on February 12th, 1809. I was the fifth of 6 children, and my father, Robert Darwin, was a well-known physician. My mother, Susanna, was part of the Wedgwood family, famed for their pottery, you know. She passed away when I was only 8, which cast a certain gloom over my early years. Nevertheless, I recall my childhood being filled with curiosity. I collected insects, shells, minerals, anything that caught my eye. I wasn't too fond of the classical curriculum at Shrewsbury School, but rummaging around the countryside was pure joy.
So you were the sort of kid who'd run off collecting beetles instead of focusing on Greek verbs?
Precisely. My father once admonished me, fearing I'd become a disgrace if I continued that way, but I simply couldn't help myself. There's a story. Once at Cambridge I found 2 rare beetles and was so eager to catch a third that I popped one into my mouth for safekeeping, only to have it emit a foul fluid that made me spit it out. In the end, I lost all 3. My fascination with insects has long been a source of both amusement and frustration, but it helped shape my observational skills.
Wow, that's quite the mental image. Your father initially wanted you to study medicine, right? But that didn't last. Could you talk about that period, especially at Edinburgh?
Yes, I was sent to the University of Edinburgh at 16. My father hoped I'd follow in his footsteps. However, I was deeply unsettled by surgeries performed without anesthesia, which was customary then. I found I couldn't bear it. The screams, the blood, the horror. I began neglecting medical studies, drifting toward zoology and geology lectures instead. I learned taxidermy from John Edmonstone, a freed slave, a remarkable teacher who shared stories of the tropics, further fueling my sense of adventure. Ultimately, I left Edinburgh without completing that medical track. My father, exasperated, turned me toward the idea of becoming an Anglican clergyman if medicine wouldn't suit me.
So that brought you to Cambridge to study for the ministry, correct?
Exactly. I went to Christ's College, Cambridge, intending to qualify as a country parson. Little did I know how far from that path I'd stray. Cambridge was where I became enthralled with natural philosophy. Reverend John Stevens Henslow, the botanist, took me under his wing. We'd have long walks discussing geology, botany, the intricacies of creation. My passion for collecting beetles exploded. I joined eccentric clubs, like the so-called Glutton Club, in which friends and I tried exotic animals for dinner. We once ate an old brown owl, which was not exactly pleasant. Still, Cambridge shaped me profoundly, forging friendships and intellectual expansions that set the stage for what followed.
Let's talk about the famed HMS Beagle voyage. You were only 22 when you departed. How did that opportunity come about, and what did your father think?
Captain Robert Fitzroy was planning a surveying mission around the world and wanted a companion of similar social standing, someone to keep him company and contribute to scientific observation. Professor Henslow recommended me. My father was initially against it, finding it a waste of time. Fortunately, my uncle Josiah Wedgwood intervened, persuading my father that it would be a valuable experience. So off I went in 1831, unprepared for just how transformative those 5 years would be.
What were your first impressions at sea? I hear you suffered from seasickness.
Miserably so. Even mild swells caused me great distress. I much preferred whenever we made landfall, which was often, given it was a surveying voyage. Our route took us to South America, the Galapagos, across the Pacific, to Australia, around the Indian Ocean, and back. On land, I explored mountains, forests, deserts, collecting plants, fossils, and animals. I was a tireless observer, scribbling endless notes about geology, local peoples, flora, fauna, everything. These observations would later serve as the bedrock for my most significant hypotheses.
I'm sure that extensive contact with different environments was crucial. Did you have any light bulb moments at that time about species changing, or did it remain hazy?
It was more subtle than a single burst of insight. Certainly, I noticed how mockingbirds on different Galapagos islands varied slightly, and likewise tortoises. I thought it peculiar, but didn't grasp the full significance until I returned to England and analysed everything with the help of experts like John Gould, who noted that my multiple species of birds were all Galapagos finches. It dawned on me that these finches, separated by island environments, had diverged from a common stock. That concept, species mutating over time, began stirring in my mind, but it took years before I fully articulated natural selection as the mechanism.
Did the diaries and data you gathered provide immediate clarity, or was it only after conversations and deeper study that you realized the significance of your specimens?
In all honesty, I didn't fully realize the significance of, say, those finches at the moment I collected them. I simply gathered what I thought distinct species. The epiphanies came in hindsight. Fossils of giant extinct mammals in South America that resembled smaller living species, the earthquake in Chile that raised coastal land, the distribution of organisms on different continents. These pieces aggregated in my notebooks, but not in a refined theory. When I returned in 1836, I began systematically cataloguing everything, sending specimens to specialists. The correspondences and analysis that followed clarified the patterns. Coupled with reading Charles Lyell's Principles of Geology and eventually Malthus's essay on population, I found the conceptual scaffolding that led me to natural selection.
I'm fascinated by how methodical you were. It said you had a nearly obsessive dedication to detail. Could you talk about that habit of rigorous note-taking and analysis?
Yes, I suppose I'm meticulously curious. Even small observations can hold importance. During the voyage, I carried notebooks everywhere, jotting down measurements, sketches, local anecdotes. Back in England, I began what I called my transmutation notebooks. Every snippet, like variations in breeding or morphological differences between island species, went into them. I also systematically interviewed pigeon breeders, horticulturalists, farmers. They had practical insights into how selective breeding could exaggerate traits. All those puzzle pieces formed the basis of my understanding that nature could similarly favor certain traits in the wild over many generations. Without that thoroughness, I might have remained stuck in vague speculation.
When did you first realize you might be challenging orthodox beliefs about creation, and potentially the biblical narrative?
Quite early, around the early 1840s, when I drafted a short essay outlining my notion of species changing over time. The idea felt scandalous. I remember confiding in my friend Joseph Hooker that revealing such a view felt like confessing a murder. The prevalent belief was that each species was a unique, unchanging creation. To suggest otherwise to devout Victorians, particularly that humans and animals share a common ancestry, seemed near blasphemous. So I kept refining my evidence quietly, wanting to be absolutely certain before going public.
Why wait 2 decades, though, from your first sketches to publishing on the origin of species? Weren't you worried someone else might get there first?
I was indeed concerned, yet I knew how uproarious the reaction could be. I felt it best to assemble a mountain of data. I studied barnacles, wrote on coral reefs, published on volcanic islands, all to bolster my credibility and to gather a robust bedrock of facts. Only in 1858, when Alfred Russel Wallace sent me an essay outlining the very same principle of natural selection, did I realize the moment had arrived. A joint paper was read at the Linnean Society. Then I rushed to condense my decades of work into On the Origin of Species, published in 1859. And indeed, the controversy began almost immediately.
Wallace must have given you quite a shock. Did you feel relief that someone else saw the same logic, or dread at being scooped?
A bit of both. My initial response was dread. I had a manuscript forming, but it wasn't complete. After calming down, I also felt validation. Here was another naturalist, independently concluding the same mechanism. He'd been working in the Malay archipelago with fewer resources, yet arrived at a matching insight. It underscored the strength of the theory. We coordinated with friends, Hooker and Lyell, and agreed to present our findings together. I remain grateful for Wallace's graciousness. He called me the true originator, which I suppose I was chronologically, though I greatly admire his dedication and brilliance.
When Origin of Species came out, how did the public react? Did you sense immediate acceptance, or was it mostly outrage?
There was a swift, heated mixture. The first printing sold out in a day, astonishing. Some scientists were convinced by the weight of evidence for evolution, though many balked at natural selection as the main driver. Others, especially religious authorities, were appalled. Satirical cartoons appeared, depicting me as an ape. Friends like Thomas Henry Huxley took up the fight on my behalf, passionately debating critics such as Bishop Wilberforce. My health was poor, so I rarely engaged in public dispute. Instead, I revised subsequent editions of Origin, refining arguments, adding clarifications. The book spurred more conversation than I ever imagined, and acceptance of evolution, if not always selection, spread quickly among the younger generation of naturalists.
I've read about that famous debate at Oxford with Wilberforce and Huxley. You weren't there, right?
No, I was at home in Down, unwell. From what I hear, Wilberforce tried to belittle the theory by joking about whether Huxley claimed an ape for a grandfather or grandmother. Huxley retorted that he'd rather have an ape as an ancestor than a man who uses his gifts to obscure the truth. The crowd reportedly erupted. It became a symbolic skirmish in the ongoing war of ideas. Huxley swiftly earned the title Darwin's Bulldog. I'm grateful for his support, though I do prefer more civil discourse. Yet it did push evolution further into public consciousness.
Your health. How exactly does it trouble you day to day? Some theorize you might have contracted Chagas disease in South America. Others say it's psychosomatic stress. How do you manage?
The exact cause remains elusive. I suffer recurring nausea, digestive pains, palpitations, and chronic fatigue that worsens under stress. Some days I'm so unwell I can barely write letters. I've developed a strict routine here at Down House. I work intensely in the morning, take a midday walk, rest in the afternoon, then maybe do small tasks or read. Emma, my wife, provides tremendous care, ensuring quiet and comfort. This calm life in the country helps me remain somewhat productive. I have regrets, as I miss many scientific gatherings, but if I push myself too far, I relapse. The speculation about a tropical parasite or an underlying anxiety, perhaps there's truth in both. Regardless, I do my best within these limits.
I've heard you also keep meticulous track of daily tasks, like your backgammon scores, letters, reading. Is that a reflection of your general scientific mindset?
It is indeed. I find that consistent note-taking helps me maintain discipline, especially given my health constraints. I log everything, how many laps I take around the sandwalk, what time I start and end writing, how many letters I send and receive. This thoroughness may appear obsessive, but it keeps me organized, ensures I don't lose track of important inquiries, and it's simply in my nature to gather data, even on myself.
Does your family contribute to your research? I know you have many children, and some of them are scientifically inclined too.
Yes, Emma and I have 10 children, though sadly we lost a few in infancy or childhood, which was not uncommon in these times. My surviving children do help with experiments, especially the simpler tasks like observing earthworm behavior or how plants respond to light. My son Francis later became a collaborator on botanical studies. The household is lively, children passing in and out, dogs underfoot, me in my study dissecting barnacles or cross-pollinating flowers. It can be chaotic, but it's also a joy to share scientific curiosity with them. They keep me youthful in spirit, if not in body.
You mentioned barnacles. You spent 8 years on them, which sounds both tedious and essential. How did that project feed into your broader evolutionary thinking?
Barnacles are surprisingly diverse. Some are hermaphroditic, others parasitic, with bizarre morphologies. By dissecting and comparing countless specimens, I gained first-hand insight into how small structural variations can define species. This thorough taxonomic work established my credibility and deepened my conviction that species are mutable. If I could unravel the complexities in barnacle classification, it lent weight to my arguments about broader patterns in nature. But yes, it was often tedious. My children called me the barnacle man. Still, it provided a rigorous foundation for the claims I'd later make in Origin.
Let's explore a different thread. Your views on religion. You once planned to be a clergyman, yet your findings challenge traditional creation narratives. Are you personally religious?
I'd say I'm agnostic, though that term is not yet widespread. In younger days, I was quite orthodox. Over the years, seeing the depth of suffering in the world, my daughter Annie's death, for instance, and understanding how natural processes shape life, gradually eroded my certainty in a personal deity meddling with each creature's form. That said, I respect the comfort and moral framework religion provides many people, including my dear Emma. I don't claim absolute knowledge that God doesn't exist. I simply believe natural laws explain phenomena well without requiring divine intervention at each step. My aim is scientific, not theological.
I've read you were cautious about discussing humans in origin. Instead, you wrote about it more explicitly in The Descent of Man. Could you talk about why and how that second book expanded on humanity's evolution?
In Origin, I only hinted that light will be thrown on the origin of man. It was intentional, as I anticipated fierce backlash. But once evolution was more widely discussed, I felt compelled to address humanity directly. In The Descent of Man, I argued that humans share common ancestors with other primates, presenting anatomical, embryological, and behavioral evidence. I also introduced sexual selection, explaining that certain traits evolve not merely for survival, but to attract mates, like a peacock's plumage. Human cultures, I proposed, reflect these biological roots, though shaped by advanced intellect and social instincts. As expected, this stirred fresh controversy, but it was the logical extension of my overall theory.
How do you respond to those who say your views strip away humanity's uniqueness or moral standing?
I'd point out that continuity with other animals doesn't negate our distinctive capacities. Reason, language, higher emotions. These too evolved, but they elevate us to a special rung. The moral sense, in particular, arises from social instincts like sympathy, refined by intellect and culture. Recognizing we share ancestry with apes humbles us, but it doesn't deny our moral agency. Indeed, I argue that as rational beings, we bear greater responsibility to act ethically. Nothing in natural selection dictates we must be cruel or unkind. Those are human choices shaped by culture and empathy. If anything, evolution underscores that cooperation and altruism can hold survival value as well.
Some critics worry your ideas justify a ruthless survival of the fittest approach in society, social Darwinism, eugenics, or imperial conquest. Was that ever your intention?
Definitely not. The phrase survival of the fittest was Herbert Spencer's, though I adopted it as a metaphor later. I do not subscribe to forcibly applying nature's harsh struggles to human moral or political systems. In The Descent of Man, I emphasized that caring for the weak is one of our noblest traits. Yes, in nature, selection can be brutal, but we are not bound to replicate that brutality in our societies. Humans can act on compassion, reason, and justice. Misusing evolutionary insights to justify oppression or violence is a perversion of the science, one that I deplore.
Let's pivot to your day-to-day life here in Kent. Could you give us a deeper sense of your typical schedule and personal routines?
Each morning, I rise around 7. After breakfast, I retreat to my study for an hour or two of writing or reading. Then I take a short break. Emma might read aloud to me, or we discuss letters. I resume work until around noon. By then, I'm mentally spent and physically drained, so I take a walk around the sandwalk, usually with my dog if the weather allows. Lunch follows, shared with the family. In the afternoon, I respond to correspondence worldwide, exchanging data and ideas. If I feel well, I might engage in small experiments, observing how seeds fare in salt water, for instance, or how earthworms react to sound. Around 4, I rest again, sometimes lying down because the nausea or palpitations demand it. In the evening, we have a light meal. Then I might read or play backgammon with Emma. By 10, I retire to bed. This repetition day after day is essential to keep me from collapse. And within those confines, I find surprising productivity.
Speaking of experiments, your work on worms might seem almost whimsical to an outsider, but it's quite important, right?
Absolutely. I've studied how earthworms help form topsoil by ingesting organic matter and slowly turning the soil. I also tested their sensitivity to light, vibration, sound. It's subtle work, but it illustrates how seemingly insignificant creatures can shape entire landscapes over time. It's another reminder that grand results, like fertile soil, arise from gradual, continuous processes mirroring the logic behind natural selection. My final book, The formation of vegetable mold through the action of worms highlights how these humble beings quietly reshape the earth.
You seem to find profound lessons in everyday details, like barnacles, worms, seeds. Does that reflect your broader philosophy of incremental change over immense timescales?
Indeed, I've grown convinced that small changes, when cumulative over great spans, yield extraordinary transformations. You see it in geology, where tiny erosion gradually carves mighty canyons. In biology, minute variations accumulate, guided by selection pressures, eventually forming new species. The same principle applies in everyday phenomena. A worm's castings slowly shift the surface of the earth, or seeds drifting on ocean currents colonize distant islands. I find great beauty in this concept, that nature's marvels are not the result of sudden miracles but of timeless, patient processes.
What about your personal joys beyond research? Any hobbies or passions outside of collecting data?
I used to find pleasure in music and poetry, but I must confess my immersion in science has dulled that taste somewhat. It saddens me at times. I recall in my autobiography mentioning that my aesthetic senses feel atrophied. I do still enjoy reading novels, especially if Emma or one of my children reads them aloud to me in the evenings. I also relish quiet family moments, watching the children discover the world. And of course there's my daily walk, which is both practical and restorative. My health constraints limit me from more vigorous pursuits, so my main joys revolve around family, gentle recreation, and the ongoing wonder of science.
If you don't mind me asking, how has fatherhood affected your perspective on evolution, especially seeing your children grow and develop?
It's certainly deepened my empathy for the fragility of life. Watching my children learn to crawl, walk, speak, I see evidence of innate instincts and the gradual unfolding of capability. It's not so unlike nature's incremental expansions of traits. The heartbreak of losing children, like my beloved daughter Annie, also accentuates the randomness of disease and the reality of suffering. It gives me a personal connection to the harshness of survival in nature. I suppose it underscores that while evolution operates by selection, on a human level we can and should temper suffering where we can, out of compassion.
Shifting back to your professional circle, can you talk about some of the allies you've had? Joseph Hooker, Thomas Huxley, Charles Lyell. How did these figures shape your trajectory?
Joseph Hooker has been my confidant since my early transmutation ideas. He's a brilliant botanist, a good friend, and he gave me unwavering support when I doubted myself. Thomas Henry Huxley, younger than I, quickly grasped the power of my arguments and championed them in public, earning that bulldog moniker. He's more combative, quite ready to spar with critics. Charles Lyell, the geologist, initially cautious about evolution, eventually acknowledged the evidence, though I believe he struggled with the full implications. Nonetheless, his uniformitarian geology heavily influenced my thinking, the notion that great changes come from slow, constant forces. Each of these individuals, in different ways, reassured me that I wasn't alone in challenging orthodox conceptions of species. Their friendship and critique sharpened my work immeasurably.
What about those less supportive, like Richard Owen? That relationship started off civil, but deteriorated, correct?
Yes, Owen is a brilliant anatomist and helped classify some of my Beagle fossils early on, but he opposed my theory of natural selection. Over time, he became vocally critical. I'm told he maneuvered behind the scenes to curb my influence or block honors. I'm not fond of personal vendettas, so I seldom confronted him directly. But Huxley and Owen clashed repeatedly. It's unfortunate when scientific discourse becomes so polarized. Still, I suppose great paradigms rarely shift without friction.
Did you ever think your ideas would so thoroughly permeate public discourse? Evolution has become a major talking point, well beyond pure scientific circles.
Never in my wildest dreams. I initially wrote Origin for a scientific audience, crammed with data on pigeons, barnacles, and so forth. I aimed to persuade fellow naturalists and serious readers. but it soon spilled into newspapers, dinner table debates, even cartoons. The idea that we might share common ancestry with other animals, especially apes, captured the public imagination. Some found it liberating, others found it scandalous or hilarious. In a way, it's gratifying that the concept of evolution by natural selection is vigorously discussed. But the outcry and sensationalism did surprise me. I do believe time will continue to vindicate the central tenets.
I'm sure it will. Switching gears, what about your coral reef theory? Many have called that a masterpiece of deductive reasoning. Care to summarize it for those who might not be geologically inclined?
Certainly. Coral atolls baffled geologists. How do these circular reefs form so far from land? My conclusion was that corals build reefs around volcanic islands that are gradually subsiding. As the island sinks, the coral continues growing upward to remain near the sunlit surface. Eventually, the island disappears beneath the water, leaving a ring of coral with a lagoon in the middle. It's an elegant example of how slow geological changes pair with biological growth to create majestic formations. Soundings taken long after my proposal confirmed the presence of submerged volcanic bases under atolls, which delighted me greatly.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about your work that persist, even in your own lifetime?
One is that I claim humans descend directly from modern apes. In truth, I say we share a common ancestor. Another is that Darwinism necessarily implies atheism. While I do question literal scriptural interpretations, I do not assert a full rejection of faith. A further misconception is that natural selection is the be-all, end-all, ignoring factors like sexual selection or the complexities of inheritance we still haven't fully explained. And of course, the myth that I recanted on my deathbed, utterly false. I have not changed my conclusions, although I remain open to legitimate refinements or corrections as new data emerge.
Let's address a heavier note. The personal losses in your life, like your daughter Annie. Did that tragedy shape your perspective on nature and God?
It did profoundly. Annie was a bright, loving child, and her passing at age 10 was devastating. Emma and I were crushed. I recall my belief in a benevolent deity being severely tested. The sense that the innocent could suffer so intensely didn't reconcile easily with the notion of a caring overseer. In the broader sense, it made me see that nature, while awe-inspiring, is indifferent to individual pain. Evolution, as a natural process, is not inherently kind. That realization further distanced me from a strictly orthodox faith, though I never became overtly hostile to religion. More than anything, it deepened my empathy for the fragility of life.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, about your daily experiments with plants, like your work on orchids, insectivorous plants, cross and self-fertilization, how do these specific studies tie back to your overall evolutionary ideas?
Each study reveals the intricacy of adaptations. For instance, in orchids, their structures are exquisitely designed to ensure insect pollination. You see elongated nectaries that only certain pollinators can reach. This mutual dependence suggests that over time, flowers and insects evolve in tandem. My book on orchids aimed to demonstrate how even the most elaborate floral contrivances can arise through natural processes. With insectivorous plants, like Drosera and the Venus flytrap, we see plants adopting carnivory to survive in nutrient-poor soils. This underscores that design can form without a divine watchmaker, merely by gradual modification that happens to fit the environment.
You've also been quite interested in the emotional expressions of humans and animals, correct?
Indeed, I published The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. It explores how certain facial expressions, like smiling, frowning, baring teeth, are shared across species, suggesting a common evolutionary origin. I even used photographs to illustrate universal expressions. This continuity in emotional display bolsters the argument that the difference between humans and other animals is one of degree rather than kind. We all share fundamental biological and behavioral traits shaped by ancestry.
Fascinating! Stepping back from the details, Do you ever worry about how future generations might interpret or misinterpret your work?
Certainly. I fear oversimplifications, people taking survival of the fittest to excuse cruelty or eugenic policies, for instance. I also worry that some may see my theory as an attack on all faith, which was never my primary aim. On the scientific side, I don't claim we have every answer. For instance, the mechanics of inheritance are still uncertain. I hope future scientists build on this foundation, clarifying genetics, mutation, and other processes. I suspect that new discoveries, perhaps in the microscopic or molecular realm, will reveal the deeper mechanisms behind variation and selection. Overall, I trust that honest inquiry will refine and sustain the core idea of evolution. But misreadings are always possible.
Speaking of inheritance, Gregor Mendel is currently experimenting with peas in Moravia. Do you have any knowledge of his work?
I've heard a whisper or two, but I haven't delved deeply into his findings. It seems he's uncovering ratios of traits in successive generations of pea plants. In time, that might prove essential to explaining how specific characteristics pass from parents to offspring without simply blending away. My own notion of pangenesis is admittedly speculative, proposing that tiny particles from each part of the body accumulate in reproductive cells. I cannot say I've solved the riddle of inheritance. It's possible that, in years to come, someone like Mendel will offer a more robust explanation that harmonizes neatly with the theory of natural selection.
Let's talk a bit about your broader worldview. You've seen conflict, heartbreak, scientific wonders. After all these experiences, how do you see humankind's future?
I'm simultaneously hopeful and cautious. Hopeful because I see how science illuminates the world and can foster progress, medical advances, understanding of our place in nature, respect for universal kinship. Cautious because we're still prone to misunderstandings, superstitions, and the misuse of knowledge. I believe if more people embraced a humble curiosity, recognized our shared ancestry, and acted with compassion, society could move toward a more enlightened state. However, the natural world remains unpredictable, and humans themselves are shaped by complex historical and cultural forces. Still, I remain an optimist at heart that truth, in the long run, tends to prevail.
Is there anything you regret not exploring further, or any area you wish you'd had the energy or time to study more deeply?
Mathematics is one. I feel my scientific rigor might have been stronger had I possessed a more substantial mathematical grounding. Also, I would like to have personally examined more living organisms in their native habitats, maybe continuing voyages, though my seasickness made that difficult. And of course, I wish I could unravel inheritance more thoroughly. But each scientist has limits. At some point, one must accept the constraints of time, health, and circumstance. I've done what I could with the faculties I possess.
Before we wrap up, do you have a guiding principle you'd like to share with future generations of scientists who will build upon your legacy?
Gather a wealth of observations meticulously, and let the facts guide you to conclusions. Never force them. Be open to changing your hypothesis if contrary data emerges. Resist the lure of dogma or preconceived beliefs. And never lose that sense of wonder at the natural world. It is the quiet marvel of everyday phenomena, a worm's burrow, a flower's pollination, the shape of a finch's beak, that can illuminate the grandest laws of life. Above all, remain humble. Science is an ever-evolving tapestry, and each generation adds new threads.
Thank you, Mr. Darwin. This has been an extraordinary privilege. I've learned so much about your personal journey, your struggles, and the enormity of your contributions. I know that many in my world hold your findings in the highest regard.
I appreciate your kind words. If my work has sparked a fraction of the curiosity I felt as a boy chasing insects through hedgerows, then I am satisfied. We may be shaped by the forces of nature, but we also wield the power of intellect and empathy. Let us use that power wisely. Now I fear my strength wanes. Perhaps a cup of tea would do us both good.
Indeed. Thank you again, Mr. Darwin. I'll let you rest, but please know that this conversation, your generosity in sharing your life's story and insights, will echo forward in time, inspiring people well beyond the 19th century.
And so concludes our extended, in-depth exchange with Charles Darwin, the meticulous observer who followed life's clues across oceans and continents and fashioned a theory that redefined our place in nature. In the hushed gardens of Down House, we glimpsed not only the intellectual rigor, but the personal doubts and triumphs of a man who insisted the smallest details over immense time can reshape the world. May his journey remind us that knowledge grows from curiosity and patience, and that we, too, are part of life's grand, evolving tapestry.